Most AI stacks fail for the same reason bad productivity systems fail. They add more handoffs, more tabs, and more decisions than the original problem ever had. On paper, the stack looks impressive. In practice, you are exporting from one tool, pasting into another, cleaning up the output, renaming files, adjusting prompts, and burning energy just keeping the setup alive. A stack only helps when it makes the core path easier to repeat. That is the part almost nobody explains. The value of a stack is not how many tools it contains. The value is how few decisions it adds. A bad stack looks powerful because it can do everything. A good stack feels almost boring because every piece has a simple job and the handoffs are clean. When people talk about AI stacks, they usually sell the fantasy version. One app researches, one drafts, one edits, one summarizes, one automates, one posts, and suddenly your whole life is leveraged. But what usually happens in real life is friction. The outputs do not match, the formatting changes, the file names drift. One tool adds fluff, another strips context, and now you are acting like the translator between your own tools. That is not leverage, that is maintenance. So the simple stack nobody explains is not about buying the most advanced set of apps. It is about picking a small set of tools that cover the only 2 or 3 steps where friction keeps repeating. One tool should create the rough output cleanly, another should shape or distribute that output without fighting the first. That is enough. Everything else is optional until the core path is stable. I started thinking about stacks differently once I realized the real bottleneck was not lack of features, it was handoffs. Every time I had to reinterpret an output, rename a file, or decide which version mattered, the stack got slower. So the question changed from what can these tools do to where does the workflow currently break? That question leads to much better decisions. A useful stack usually begins with one source tool. The source tool creates the first meaningful artifact in a repeatable way. If I am creating content, that might be a script. If I am handling outreach, it might be a clean message draft. If I am working with notes, it might be a decision board. The point is not perfection. The point is a usable first artifact that is easy to hand off. Then comes one shaping tool. This is the part that refines, formats, voices, edits, repurposes, or organizes the source output without rewriting the whole job. The shaping tool should reduce cleanup, not create a second writing session. If the shaping step regularly forces me to rebuild the output from scratch, the stack is lying to me. That is why I distrust end-to-end stacks. The more a tool claims to do everything, the more generic it usually becomes. The all-in-one promise sounds great until brand, pacing, tone, or control start to matter. Then you are back to manual work anyway, except now you spent time inside a rigid system first. A narrow tool with a clean job usually gives more real leverage than a giant tool with fantasy marketing. The handoff itself matters more than most people realize. I want the output of tool 1 to land in a shape that tool 2 can use immediately. Same file naming logic, same structure, same expectation. If I constantly have to translate between tools, the stack is costing me attention every single day. Good stacks reduce translation, bad stacks create it. The other hidden issue is emotional overhead. A stack can technically work and still be a bad stack if it feels annoying enough that I start avoiding it. That matters. If the setup requires too much remembering, too much checking, or too much fiddling, I will use it less consistently. A stack has to survive tired days. If it only works when I feel organized, it is not really a stack. It is a demo. That is why I care about boring so much. The best stack is often the one that feels least exciting after week 2. It just does its job. It creates the rough output, it shapes or distributes it, it saves me decisions, it leaves behind reusable artifacts. It does not require constant admiration, it requires repetition. A lot of people also build stacks backward. They start with tools they like and then try to invent reasons to keep them. That is expensive. The right order is the reverse. Start with the bottleneck. Then choose the smallest combination of tools that reduces that bottleneck without adding 2 new ones. Build from pain, not from features. For example, if the real problem is turning one long piece of work into multiple usable outputs, the stack should focus on source plus multiplier. One tool makes the long form predictable. One tool multiplies it into shorts, posts, or smaller pieces. If the problem is not distribution, that stack is overkill. If the problem is drafting, a repurpose tool does not solve anything. The stack has to match the bottleneck, not the trend. Another thing almost nobody says clearly is that stacks need defaults: default prompt, default output shape, default naming, default folder, default weekly loop. Without defaults, every session turns into a fresh decision tree. That is where the time leak hides. People think the time is going into creation, when a lot of it is actually going into redeciding the same setup. Saving structures matters here too. If a combination works once, save the exact pattern. Which output shape passed cleanly from one tool to the next? Which naming format prevented confusion? Which prompt kept the draft in the right container? Stacks only compound when they develop memory. The test I keep coming back to is simple. Does the stack shorten the path from intention to artifact, or does it just move the work around? A lot of AI setups look efficient because they create fast outputs. But if those outputs still require major cleanup, the path is not shorter, it is just rearranged. Real leverage feels lighter, not just faster on paper. I also watch whether the stack makes me calmer or more brittle. A good stack should reduce ambiguity. It should make it easier to know what happens next. A bad stack makes everything feel one step more fragile: one broken file, one wrong version, one awkward export, and the whole thing starts wobbling. That is usually a sign there are too many handoffs, or the jobs are not clearly separated. So the simple AI stack nobody explains is not glamorous. It is source tool plus shaping tool plus saved defaults. That is the core. If there's a third tool, it should exist for one clear repeated job, not because the setup needs to look advanced. The more obvious each job is, the more likely the stack is to survive real use. The practical way to build it is straightforward. Name the bottleneck, choose the smallest set of tools that solves that bottleneck, make the handoff clean, save the structure that worked, run the same loop until it becomes boring. Then, and only then, decide whether something else needs to be added, because that is the truth people skip. The best AI stack is not the most advanced one. It is the one you can repeat without hating your life. If it saves decisions, reduces handoffs, and leaves you with a real artifact faster than before, it is doing its job. If it mostly gives you one more system to manage, it is not a stack, it is overhead. There's also a measurement angle here that keeps stacks honest. After you build one, ask what changed in the actual workflow. Did setup time shrink? Did cleanup shrink? Did the handoffs get cleaner? Did you stop losing files, versions, or context between tools? Those are the signals that matter. A stack does not become good because it looks advanced. It becomes good because the same work becomes easier to repeat. If I were tightening a stack further, I would keep a tiny failure checklist. Where did the handoff break? Which tool changed the output shape in a bad way? Which file naming step was inconsistent? Which part created the most manual cleanup? That matters because stack problems are often mechanical, not philosophical. Once you know exactly where the friction is, the stack becomes much easier to improve. Another upgrade almost nobody talks about is reducing mode switching inside the stack itself. If I can batch one stage before jumping to the next, the stack gets lighter. Write 2 drafts, then shape 2 drafts, then repurpose 2 outputs. That kind of batching matters because it keeps me from constantly reloading my brain, just to maintain the system. I also think stacks need a ruthless rule about tool replacement. A new tool should only enter the stack if it removes an obvious repeated bottleneck. Not because it is interesting, not because it is trending, not because it promises more features. More tools do not equal more leverage. Better handoffs equal more leverage. The real point is that a stack should disappear into the work. I should notice the artifact more than the machinery. If I'm spending more attention thinking about the stack than using the stack, then it is not simple enough yet. The best stacks become background. That is how you know they're actually helping.